Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner, episode number 204, Burn Offerings, the cult classic 1976 film starring Karen Black, Oliver Reed, and Betty Davis. And there was a lot of other cool cast members in the film as well, too. But we'll go with those three as the headliners. With me today to discuss this film is my friend, my co-host, the one and only, Mr. Ross Amico. Ross, welcome.
Hi, Roy. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey,
Happy
Ross.
Sunday.
Happy Sunday, Ross. And it is the 1st of October. We are kicking off Halloween month. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up for this month, which I'm very excited about. We'll touch upon that a little bit. But the main thing being right now is we are in the month of horror.
Oh.
No, I always like I like Halloween month. It's just a fun time. It really is.
I do too. Very much. Yeah.
Hey, I just want to welcome our viewers out there. Yeah, and I know we actually, folks, thank you again. I had to push the time out a little bit. There was just a lot of stuff going on, so we appreciate your flexibility in joining us a half an hour later than what was scheduled, as I like to say. So again, that's much appreciated. Thanks for your flexibility. I see the first person out there is Urko 2005. Hi, Urko. I see Colin Curlis is joining us from the UK. Colin, welcome to the show. And Jeff Rubel is joining us from out west and from Utah. Good to see you out there, Jeff. And also Christian is joining us from Canada. Welcome, Christian.
Good to see you.
And Lou, I was talking to Lou earlier today. Welcome, Lou. Lou's joining us from Rhode Island. And Randy Lee is also in the house. Randy's joining us. I am here boldly going where no one has gone before, ready to engage in this moment. And we appreciate that, Randy. And let me see. Colin is commenting, confuses me. This internet is the second here. Lots of laughs. It's all good. And I see Linda is also joining us from Canada, Western Canada. Great to see you out there, Linda. And also Joe McNally is joining us from Scotland. Joe, welcome. Thank you. And we realized, too, that our UK viewers and folks out in Scotland, are like 5 hours ahead of us. So we appreciate you joining us because we know the hour is late and it's probably about 12:38 p.m. or a.m. right now. So thank you for being out there. And
on a Monday morning.
Yeah. Happy Monday. Claudia is also joining us. Claudia, welcome. Great to see you out there as well, too.
Claudia.
Hoping everybody had a wonderful weekend. Also, Martin is joining us from New York. Welcome, Martin. Great to see you there, too.
Where's our ticker tape?
Oh, you know what, Ross?
I never know whether to buy or sell. Or did you do one?
I did do one, and it is.
This is really seat of the pants this week, folks. Oh yeah, 1 million years BC. Perfect.
You know what? I didn't hit the save button. Oops.
Nobody cares. Just run 1 million years BC. It'll be great.
Oh, yeah. Just confuse everybody, right? Way to go, Ross.
Burn Offerings. I have a hard time keeping this title in my head. I keep confusing it for some reason with Deadly Blessing, which is a totally different movie with Maren Johnson and I don't know why my brain keeps reverting to that. It's something about the late 70s, early 80s horror, but has nothing to do with that. This is one of those 70s haunted house films. And in fact, it got the jump on a lot of, it caught the wave. There was a wave of haunted house movies that came out right after this, that it bears, not a striking similarity to, because they came after, but it was kind of the forerunner of some other more fondly remembered in some instances, haunted house movies.
Well, to your point, if I remember correctly, I might be off on the year, but I believe Amityville Horror, which is kind of based on a true story too, that came out in, I believe that came out in 77, right? And wasn't that with Josh?
79. 79. The book was 77.
Okay.
Because remember, the book was everywhere. Yeah. Supposedly based on a true story. Yeah. But yeah, Chris Christopherson, right? And Margot Kidder, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say Margot Kidder, and it was Chris Christopherson. Why did I think it was Brolin, James Brolin?
Oh, James Brolin. Maybe I'm mixing it up. I don't know. Maybe Christopherson was in the sequel, or Brolin was in the sequel. I can't remember. Brolin might have been the sequel.
Because there were actually 2 or 3, weren't there?
Oh, there are multiple Amityville Horrors. I'll let everybody else sort that out. But you're right. Yeah, Brolin was in one of them, and Rod Steiger. You know,
Rod Steiger.
How the mighty have fallen. Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that I can't say that was any better than this movie was, but the point is there were a lot of haunted house movies coming out. The Shining was very prominent.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I mean, it's not by any means the first haunted house movie. For my money, the best haunted house movie is The Haunting from 1963. That's the one that freaked me out when I saw it. But we had haunted house movies going back to the 30s.
Oh yeah.
So and even it predates that. I mean, in literature and pulps and the, I don't know about penny dreadfuls, but they always had the old dark house. Back to Gothic literature, there was always something going on. But what set this apart is by the 70s, there was always some kind of well, even by the 60s, by The Haunting, there was always a psychological element to it. It was always kind of a reflection of the characters, states. And in this instance, we have the house that's kind of almost alive.
Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, folks.
Yeah, well, you get that in a lot of haunted house movies, though.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. Hey, I want to say hi to Shari. She says, "Hey guys, happy October! Joining the show from downstairs."
Happy October from downstairs.
And Christian says, "I remember the critics weren't good on burnt offerings, but I love it."
Yeah.
Christian, this movie, as I've talked about on other shows, this movie was being streamed, was on Prism, for you folks out there that remember Prism back in the day, which is in the Northeast area. And it was like the equivalent of what they used to call Channel 100 HBO. And this film was on all the time. And in fact, I had mentioned to my mom that we were going to be doing the show, and she was like, "Oh, I remember this movie from beginning to end and everything." So it's like, it's almost like a guilty pleasure type of movie for me.
It's a guilty pleasure.
It really is.
Because for 2 years, Roy has suggested this movie for Halloween. And I confess I was dodging it because I had already seen it at least twice. And
that was 2 times too many for Ross.
Yeah. But I have to say, like, having watched it yesterday, the other times that I saw it in this, back when it was shortly after it was made on the kind of televisions we had back then. And then I probably saw it on a washed out VHS tape since then. So it always had that kind of that, less than optimal production values to it. And even though while I watched it yesterday, I thought, okay, well, it's anything Dan Curtis touches is kind of like a TV movie. Has a TV movie feel to it.
Exactly.
I have to say it wasn't as painful as I remember it being. It was well done. It just, for what it lacked in technical finesse, as far as what we expect from a major motion picture, it made up for with, character and the, I thought the scenes were handled competently, and, it was well done.
Yeah. I mean,
so it is a guilty pleasure, though. Yeah,
it really is. Now, let me ask you, Ross, when was the first time you actually saw this movie, or do you have an idea of around the time frame that you first saw it?
It had to be the 70s. It had to be, after. I don't think I saw it on Channel 100 or what have you, but I didn't see it in the movies. I was too young, probably. Although, I saw a Mega Man in the movies. We all know that. but I saw it on television at some point, and I probably saw it on VHS around 2000, early 2000s.
Right.
So this is because I always lag behind the technology. As everybody's going to DVD, that's when I start breaking out the VHSs. Yeah. So when was the first time you saw it? You saw it on Prism, as you said, right?
Yeah, I saw it right after it was in the movies because pretty much,
Yeah.
I think it was maybe there was only like a lag time of about a year when the films would come out when they were on
Well,
when they were on Prism.
it's possible I saw it on paid cable then, because we did have HBO and Prism at a point.
Yeah.
And I think we had it by that point, because I remember when Superman came on for the first time, and that was a big deal when it came to pay TV, and that had to be 79.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because the movie was out in 78.
Yeah, I mean they shot that film in 76, but to your point, it was Starlog number 20, Ross. They had Superman. They had Christopher Reeve on the cover.
It was Christmas Christmas season 78 when I saw it in the theater. So
yeah, that's
good times. Good times. Yeah,
the amount of time that has gone by, it's crazy.
I know. But I just saw on the internet Christopher Reeve would have been like 72 or something this year.
Yeah,
it's in his 70s anyway. Yeah, it's crazy.
I know. The time has just kind of marched on.
Can that be true?
Yeah.
Is Gene Hackman really like 20 years older than him?
Probably.
I guess so.
Because I'm thinking back, I remember, what was it? I think he was like 25 or 26 years old when he did the movie. So yeah, that it kind of adds up. And that was 45 years ago it came out. So yeah. And it was shot in 76. So probably, 72. Let me see here. I see that, talking about the Amityville Horror, Christian was saying the sequel was a prequel.
Right.
Claudia is saying that she has not seen this film.
Ah, okay. Well, we'll spoil it for you. But by spoiling it, we'll actually totally roast The Haunting. There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she also said, "Cheers, it's about time." So thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. Shari's saying The Sentinel was a very scary haunted house movie. Saw it when I was 11 on the big screen, and it scared me to death.
I saw similarities between this and The Sentinel. This came first. But the book for The Sentinel was out earlier, because my mom would always read these horror books in the 70s, I remember, and she read The Sentinel and the Hephaestus Plague, which they made into Bug. You remember the phones with the bugs would burst into flame and catch people on fire, and Coma, of course, Michael Crichton, and Haunting of Hill House and Hell House by Richard Matheson. She read all of these things. Jaws, of course.
Matheson did so much too. Richard Matheson.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he worked with Dan Curtis, the director of this film, on a number of projects, including Trilogy of Terror.
Yes, exactly. And also with Dan Curtis. Now you were mentioning that this movie was actually based on a book. I believe it was by Robert Marasco.
Marasco, I think.
Marasco. Yeah.
Marasco wrote.
I think it came out in 1973, so it predated the movie by 3 years. But Dan Curtis actually had co-wrote the screenplay for this film. And to your point earlier, I mean, he did a lot of the TV movies. I mean, The Night Stalker.
Oh, and Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows, exactly.
Yeah, Dark Shadows, definitely. Yeah, that's really what put him on the map. And he did The Night Stalker, the TV movies that kicked off culture. What was the other one? The Night
Strangler?
Night Strangler was the other one, right?
And that was 72, 73, so it was right in that time frame too.
Yeah, that was kind of his strike zone, because around that time he also started remaking some of the classic horror monster movies. Yeah, for TV. He did the Jack Palance Dracula.
Jack Palance, right? Yeah.
Which I'm convinced is the Dracula that ruined all subsequent Draculas, because that's the first one that I remember anyway that had the love story in it. Because Dracula is always this agent of evil. He's just like this monster, unstoppable engine of evil. But they made him a sympathetic character in that one. because he's pining for his lost love, which Francis Coppola continued to do in his version. But it just seems like there's always that kind of Byronic aspect to the character, which wasn't there in the original book. Yeah.
Well, and even with Christopher Lee, I always like to go back to the Hammer films with Christopher Lee.
And Richard Matheson adapted it. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah. But I was going to say with Christopher Lee, I mean, it wasn't so much romanticism; it was more
right. Yeah.
Evil. I mean, he was.
Yeah,
there was a taste or a touch of romanticism, but not in the direction that you went with. Well, the 1977-78 film with Frank Langella. I mean that.
Right.
They made him like this sex symbol.
Right.
You know.
Well, Dracula always has kind of there's always kind of a subtext, even in the original book, about this forbidden sexuality. But yeah, as far as the actual, because love is kind of a positive attribute, and there's nothing, Dracula, as he's presented in the book, there's no real, as I recall anyway, there's no real, love. It's more about this forbidden, sexuality, that Mina's so drawn to him, and and Dracula takes what he wants, and
it's almost like taking the apple from the tree.
yeah, and there's well, whatever. Anyway, so the sympathetic Dracula thing, that's a modern invention, and I'm convinced that Dan Curtis may have done that. I don't know if that for a fact, but I'm convinced that that's probably the case.
That might be a discussion that we can look into for later at another time. Claudia said, "Hey, Roy and Ross, how about a show with love at first bite? Good for some laughs. I apparently have a copy of an original script. I got it in an auction at one of the Alliance conventions. It's different than the film. I'm sure they went off script."
George Hamilton.
Johnson.
Yeah, and who was it? St. John.
Jill St. John?
Was she in it? Was it?
She may have been in that.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the theater. I haven't seen that in a long time.
That came out in what, 79, I think?
Was it that late? Yeah.
I think it was.
Possibly, yeah.
I'm guessing.
And Richard Benjamin.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, we've talked about him with Quark.
Right?
Jeff was saying, wasn't Coppola's Dracula partially based on the Palance?
It had I don't think they credit it, but it was totally in that mold.
Yeah. Happy October, Matt.
Happy October, Matt.
See you out there.
Oktoberfest.
And William Graff is joining us. William, welcome to the show. He's saying, at least Dan Curtis was always smart enough to hire terrific actors, but there's nary a twist in Burnt Offering that one can't see coming from miles away.
Yeah. First of all, you kind of have to scroll back your expectations to the time when it was made. But even then, you can kind of see. I think you could have kind of seen what was coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
But these things weren't as totally cliched as they are now back then. I mean, were there any twists you couldn't see coming? No, he's probably right.
Well, let's just have a little discussion about those twists.
It wasn't like a very original movie.
But but it was somewhat predictable with certain aspects of it, and there was some foreshadowing in the direction things were going. There's the movie poster, and the perfect summer rental for the last vacation you'll ever take. What a tagline for a movie, right? Now, in regards to the cast, there we go. I mean, we've got I don't have them listed there, but Karen Black, she's playing Marion, the wife. Right. You have Oliver Reed, who is playing Benjamin. He's the husband. You have Davy, who is played by Lee H. Montgomery. And then you also have Betty Davis, who's playing Auntie.
Right. So you got all this star power, and Burgess Meredith. Yeah.
Burgess Meredith. Eileen Heckert.
Right.
How about Dub Taylor? He was in all the Westerns. Yeah, he did a lot of character actor. My goodness.
Right.
And then, of course, You've got Anthony James. You talk about freaking me out. I mean, that was one of the kind of like how Ben is freaked out in this movie by when he's thinking about his mom's funeral, and he sees the chauffeur driver, and then I mean Anthony James, that whole thing with him. I think he was probably one of the most scariest characters in this movie, and he didn't do anything bad. It was just his presence and the way he just with that evil smile. I mean, it just makes you quake.
It's the kind of thing where if they had done this a few years later, they would have franchised it and done a whole series of films called The Chauffeur or something, like they kind of did with Jason or Freddy Krueger or whatever, because he's a very memorable character. And if you're a kid, you're going to remember The Chauffeur. Yeah. And Dan Curtis, actually, this was not in the original book, he worked this in from a childhood experience. His mother died and he was just a kid, and he was at the funeral, and he remembered a chauffeur standing outside the funeral home, and the chauffeur was laughing. And this always kind of like stuck with him. And he this was not in the book. He wrote it into the script. So, and it turns out it was the most memorable part of the film.
And the irony is, I mean, for me, it was just very, it was a very impressionable scene. Incidentally, he, as far as Anthony James, though, made character actor that did a lot of episodic television back in the day. In fact, I was watching an episode of The Big Valley just recently, and he turned up in that, in which he was in, and also,
good.
Well, I'm sorry,
you have a good eye to be able to pick him out, in the TV shows.
Yeah,
because he usually plays a villain or a henchman. You know what I mean? He's not really a big name.
No, but he was a great supporting character. And then for the Buck Rogers episode, fans out there from the series with Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray from 7981, which I was just talking about recently on the Facebook page, because it just celebrated its anniversary in regards to being on the air, because it debuted back in September of 79. So that was 44 years ago. If anybody out there remembers a season 1 episode, it was called, I think it was Plot to Kill a City, and it was a 2-parter. And Frank Gorshin was actually one of the major villains in that episode. In those episodes, it was it was almost like a gang of 4, and Anthony James plays this mutant whose face is covered, and what he can do is literally walk through walls, and he's undefeatable. And what happened was his race had been scarred and mutated, and the character that Frank Gorshin is playing essentially is dominating him and pretty much making him do what his bidding, because he has some kind of device on him that if he doesn't follow his orders, he'll essentially kill him. But anyway, if anybody remembers that specific episode, but yeah, to your point, Ross, he turned up in a lot of stuff, and he was really good.
So you have Anthony James, he's not a big name, and then you've got somebody like Bette Davis, who everybody has known, a legend for decades, and you've got so much star power in this. 4 of the actors were nominated for Academy Awards, not for this. 2 of them won. Eileen Heckart won. I'd never seen Butterflies Are Free, but she won Best Supporting Actress for that film, and was nominated before for The Bad Seed, which is another film people may remember. Burgess Meredith was nominated a couple of times. Yeah. Bette Davis was nominated 10 times and won twice. And that was a record. Yeah, that was a record at the time. Karen Black, she was nominated for a number of things. Huge actress in the 70s. She's at her peak in this. In fact, she kind of has alluded to the fact that her work with Dan Curtis is kind of what led to her transitioning into kind of the B movies, the horror movies, because she was so memorable in Trilogy of Terror with the Zuni doll, and then she did this. And then after that, I mean, she had a few other roles, but she really became a genre actress later in life, where she was just doing horror movies pretty much.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about Trilogy of Terror, because they did a broadcast on the it was on one of the cable stations last night, and a friend from Great school, Joanne was posting about seeing it, and she was like throwing, saying essentially, did anybody watch this, or was talking about it. So what I did was I commented, and then I went back and I actually posted our link from
the
when
link.
we talked.
Yes. See this show.
Yeah, no, and you know what's scary, Ross, is that was 3 years ago. We talked about that, and I couldn't even believe it was
Are you
October of
kidding me?
2020. No, it was 3 years ago. I was
How
like,
long have we
what
been
the
doing
heck?
this show?
I know. The show actually premiered April 3rd of 2020. You jumped on with me in June of 2020. So yeah, it's been, you've been on for it's been 3.5 years.
This is my third Halloween. Yeah. Wow.
Third Halloween. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
We did that. We did it 3 years ago?
3 years ago.
Okay.
I'm here.
That is nuts. Yeah, so she was in, Karen Black was in everything in the 70s, and a hugely respected actress. She was nominated for 5 Easy Pieces. She was in that film, memorable role as Jack Nicholson's girlfriend, which he basically ditches. And she was in Nashville. Everybody wrote their own music in Nashville too, the Robert Altman movie. So she was also nominated. Yeah.
I was going to say she was a singer too, besides.
Yeah, so collectively they were all nominated. The album was nominated for a Grammy on top of everything else. But she was nominated for The Great Gatsby, Best Supporting Actress. She was in Alfred Hitchcock's last movie, Family Plot. Yeah, so she was in a lot of stuff. Very, very. The Day of the Locust, which is a movie she didn't care for very much, but she got a lot of notice for that. And Easy Rider. I think that might have been her first feature with Jack Nicholson.
Right, because the movie you mentioned, she was nominated for the Academy Award, but she won the Golden Globe. She was a 2-time Golden Globe winner as well. Yeah. So yeah,
Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, right?
Hopper,
yeah. So and here she is doing another horror film. Which kind of, by the end, it's kind of almost like a reprise of the trilogy of terror.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she did that so well that everybody said, "Okay, well, let's get her in our horror movie now."
And the interesting thing too, talking about the trilogy of terror, bringing that back, a lot of people, Joanne, that she didn't even realize that there were 2 other stories that she was involved in, and it's like a lot of people that we've even talked to always remember that movie, of course, with the Zuni doll and everything, and that's the one that sticks out. I mean, I remember having that memory.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I was just going to say, I remember. You just, everybody seems to remember that whole piece. I mean, that's centered around that.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the top 5, maybe top 3 memorable moments if you were a kid seeing that on television in a TV movie. That, and I think the carrot people that the yam people from what was it? Was it Don't Be Afraid of the Dark? Is that what the movie was? We did it last year.
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Yeah.
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark was another.
Kim Darby and Jim Hutton. Jim Hutton and Kim Darby. Yeah.
And wasn't Burgess Meredith?
It's funny too, because with trilogy, it's no.
I'm thinking Uncle Charlie, probably. I'm thinking of William Demarest. Can you hear me? Roy? Did you freeze?
William Demarest, yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm totally frozen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Ross?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Of course I can. Can
you
hear me?
Oh, am I going in and out?
Yeah. You're freezing. Can you hear me?
Really? Oh, wow.
You doing?
I can hear you fine.
Are you playing with me?
I can, but I was wondering why.
Mm-hmm. Oh dear. This is more horrifying than anything in Burn Offerings.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I'm not. Oh dear.
We're having a totally out of sync conversation, because everything I'm hearing from you has nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
Can you hear me now?
Still, It's like you're responding to things that I said like 10 minutes ago. Oh, boy. This house is alive, I tell you. Oh, good, he's gone. All right, now we can get down to cases. Am I on? It says live. All right, so I guess it's the Ross show now. All right, let's can burn offerings and talk about a movie that I enjoyed. Yeah. So in any case, as we're waiting for Roy to get back, what are we talking about? Haunted house movies. I can't see your comments, but what are your favorite haunted house movies, maybe, other than Burn Offerings? You know, there are similarities in this film to other films and other books, but this pretty much came before The Shining, for instance. Apparently, this is one of Stephen King's favorite movies, favorite haunted house movies, anyway. Favorite movies, I think he dubbed he put out a book and had a list of his favorite movies, and this was in there, I recall. But in any case, before he wrote the novel, he had seen this, and before the movie came out, by extension, this had existed for some time. And Sherry mentioned the Changeling. No, not the Changeling, the Sentinel. The Sentinel, which Burgess Meredith was in. He played essentially the same character, just about as he did in this movie, the same role. It's odd that Roy would be gone for this long. He's missing the good stuff. Ever show you my CD collection? I should show you my CD collection, maybe. Oh, okay. So you're back. You're missing all the good stuff, Roy.
Oh, I heard it all, Ross. I heard you talking to the audience. It was good. It was entertaining.
Well, did you hear what I said then about The Shining and about the Sentinel?
I did, and I also heard you say about in regards to Stephen King. Did you say that this was his favorite movie or one of his favorite movies?
One of his favorites. Well, he had a book. I'm trying to think of what it was called. I'm sure that there are people out there that have it or read it. I had it in one of my bookstores, but I remember it had a list of his favorite horror movies, and this was one of them that turned up in that list. So I know and there's so many similarities to The Shining in this. And just like in The Shining, in the movie The Shining, there's all the subtext and stuff that's not really overtly stated. Part of the reason for that is because they lopped off the first 15 minutes of the film. They had actually filmed earlier scenes that were with the family in New York,
right,
and planning to get out to go to this, they find the ad and they're going to go and rent the house for the summer and what have you. And it has all the stuff about living in the city. But apparently in the novel, which I have not read, Oliver Reed's character had some issues where, he had a history of insanity in the family and he was afraid he was going to lose his mind. And Karen Black's character had this dissatisfaction with their relationship. And it's all stuff that comes out in the movie. And it's you can see the house just exacerbates it. And, as with any good haunted house movie, is it really the house or is it really them? You know what I mean? That they kind of project it onto the house, or it becomes a metaphor. Mm-hmm. Even at the opening shot, they come in in the car, they're driving to the house. I mean, what are they going to do? But they do that in The Shining also with Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, right, with the kid. And then there's a suggestion in both of them. There's a suggestion in The Shining about him having hurt Danny. Is that what his name was? Danny?
Yes. Davy is in the...
in The Shining.
Shining is Danny, you're right.
Danny, yeah. There's that suggestion that he hurt him in some way when he was drunk, and you're not sure if it was really like a physical abuse or what have you. And in this film, you actually see it with the swimming pool scene, and there's that weird dynamic with the father and the kid, where, again, what is the film telling us? Because you have that going on, and then Karen Black as the mother is upstairs with all her shiny objects and the photos, and she's polishing up the house, and she's all, obsessed with.
It's materialistic.
She's obsessed with the objects, with the house, with the materialism, mm-hmm. while and all this stuff's going on under the surface with the abuse of the child at the hands of the father and everything, and I'm convinced that on some level that they did that on purpose, which makes it more than just a TV movie.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, they did. Now, did you say that they did film that footage? Because I didn't come across that.
The 15-minute.
The extra 15 minutes in the beginning.
Supposedly, they lopped off. They shot stuff in before the action of the movie.
Right.
But they just decided to start the movie where they started it. They had all the stuff before, and they just threw it out because they thought it slowed it down.
And I honestly, I think it would be really relevant. And I'm not sure. I know there's a Blu-ray There's a Blu-ray of this movie out there, and I believe the actor that's the son, Lee H. Montgomery, actually is interviewed for it. So, for me personally, I think it would be pretty interesting to actually watch the commentary, hear him talk about working with Karen Black. I mean, she's like a legend. Betty Davis, another legend, and even Oliver Reed. I mean, Oliver Reed, with all of his issues that we've kind of tiptoed around on the show and talked about him. He was an excellent actor. I mean,
excellent actor and a legend on a lot of levels.
On a lot of levels, yeah. I mean, I still crack when I'm probably after the show if I need to get a good laugh. I'll probably watch that David Letterman interview with him.
Yeah, he was a nightmare to interview.
Oh,
the Beast,
man.
Betty Davis in this film, she couldn't stand him. I don't know if you read anything about this.
And then I read too that she actually felt that Karen Black potentially may not have been giving her the respect that she felt that she was required. So
yeah, well, she might have been a little bit of a diva, having been a reigning Hollywood queen since the 30s.
Yeah,
and I'm sure Karen Black was just totally new Hollywood and I mean new NEW, new Hollywood, and just not impressed. Just doing her thing. Mm-hmm. But Oliver Reed was a whole other level. Yeah, because that guy, it's funny that he plays the character he does in the movie, because he's kind of he's totally victimized and emasculated, kind of. You know what I mean? He becomes powerless, whereas in real life, Oliver Reed's just a force of nature, and you can't be tamed.
Yeah, it's acting at its best, and that's why, I mean, you do find out as this film starts and everything. I mean, like you said, they're on their way. They're it's called the backdoor plot, folks. Here we come. They're on their way to the house. They get there, and there's a tension that's going on. And when they see the house, I mean, they're like, this can't be. This, is there like, another area that they should be going to? Is this like the right road that we're driving on? And they verify that this is indeed the location of the house, and find out they're greeted by a sister and a brother, played by Burgess Meredith and Eileen Eckert, and essentially saying that this is what was in the newspaper, like you were referencing. And Oliver Reed, Ben, is just like, this, we're not going to be able to afford it. There's no way, it's out of our league and everything. And Mrs. Allardyce, Eileen Eckert's character, the daughter, says that it's going to be $900, and then there's a pause, and then he's like, no, and then she's like, for the entire summer, and it's like, what, And now, granted, $900 doesn't sound like a lot, but again, remember, this is 1976. It's a lot of $900 is a lot of money now. 1976, it was a lot more money, than it is now, and that starts it, and then they go back to New York because well, let me go before I go there. They're trying to figure out if they're going to make the decision, and they're trying to entice them. They're inspecting the house a little bit. They go out to the to where the garden is, like the greenhouse, and there's nothing but like dead plants. I mean, it's just all over the place. And Karen Black, Marion, is just like appalled by it. She's just like, it's like, what a waste, and this is awful, and it's you can see how it's like really getting underneath her skin and everything, and she's just like really bothered by it. And meanwhile, the son, Davy, is actually outside, and he's just staying close to the house, doing his own thing. And Mrs. Allardyce, Miss Allardyce, the daughter, Eileen Eckert, is essentially conversationalizing with them to find out who's going to be coming, who's going to be staying at the house. And is it just going to be the three of them? And then it comes out that they have an aunt, and then she's 70, 72, 74. And then she's like, oh, she's an old gal. And do you mind having her with you? You know, I mean, there's like an implication with that, and they're like, no, it's fine, it's fine. And then Burgess Meredith's character finds out, you know, he comes down, he's like in a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair, and they find, you know, he's saying that, hearing that they have a son, and then he's like, oh, let me see, and then he looks out the window, and then you see Davies climbing and being mischievous, and then what happens is he falls down and he gets hurt, and then they come over to the window and they're like, no, he's okay, just let him be, it's okay, and not to intervene. And this is where it starts, where it's very subtle, but it starts because Davy comes back in, he's all scraped up. The sister, Miss Allardyce, goes off to, you know, clean him up. They go into the kitchen, and it's really eerie because Burgess Meredith, the brother, is just kind of like looking out. And then, of course, you've got the handyman that's coming through.
Yeah, Dub Taylor. Yeah.
Dub Taylor, and he's holding a plant that he got from out in the greenhouse. And Burgess Meredith isn't even looking at him. And he goes, "What are you going to do with that plant?" And then Dub Taylor is like, "Oh, well, I was going to get rid of it because it's nothing but dead." And he goes, "Really? Did you take a look?" And then he looks at it, and then there's a little bit of greenery that's starting to grow.
Right.
You got greenery music, and that's what sets off everything in regards to a foreshadowing of what's going to start to happen.
Right. Well, Karen Black, she's appalled by the greenhouse and everything, but as soon as she has an immediate connection with the house, you know,
Yeah.
as soon as you can see. But yeah, anytime anybody gets injured, anytime there's any kind of negative energy or anything, the house gains more power, you know, and rejuvenates. So, which you very quickly figure out.
Exactly.
As you
do
in the movie. Yeah.
I want to welcome some people that I'm seeing out here. Jack Daly's joining us. Jack, welcome. Great seeing you out there. I see Dennis Chevalier is also joining us. Welcome, Dennis. Dennis is joining us from Canada.
Hello.
Let me see here. And also, I think May is out there. May, welcome to the show. Good to see you out there. There she is. It's okay, May. We had some technical difficulties, but we got through them.
Yes, we did.
We did. In fact, going back to some of the stuff here. Looks like when you were talking about your favorite movies, Jeff Rubel said Lord of the Rings. When I wasn't on screen, Ross.
I said horror movie, haunted house movies. I guess. Oh, now I'm frozen. Okay. Well, that was
a while ago. That was okay. Phantasm. That was
Phantasm.
Phantasm.
Yeah, Phantasm was filmed in the same house, that Dunmere house, which was featured in, you know, a number of motion pictures, and they filmed the entire thing on location there. This was built in 1899 by Alexander Dunsmore, who was apparently a coal magnate. And I don't know if you read this or not, but he built this for his bride-to-be.
Yeah, very tragic.
So he died on his honeymoon.
Yeah.
And within a year and a half, she died in the house.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he died of alcoholism. She died of cancer. So,
very sad.
Maybe the house, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, this house, I believe, this house is where? It's in
Oakland.
Oakland, right?
Yeah.
California.
So it was used in Phantasm. It was used in a number of movies. I Married an Axe Murderer, the Clint Eastwood movie, True Crime.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen all the movies that it was used in. A View to a Kill. It was used
back in 1985, and it was probably the residence of whatchamacallit. I can't think of his last name. Chris. He was the villain, the Bond villain in the movie.
Walken?
Christopher Walken, yeah. The last time it was in a film, I think it was in 2018 that it was used. But definitely, it would be kind of cool to check out. And I don't know if I'd say a bucket list item, but I mean, there's a lot of heritage there, and it was part of film history. Nash Bridges was actually filmed at this house.
Oh, well, there you go. Did I tell you I interviewed Christopher Walken once?
No, you didn't.
I didn't tell you the story.
No, you didn't.
It was a phone interview. I didn't interview him in person. He was in a movie called A Late Quartet, about a string quartet, and what's his name? Philip Seymour Hoffman was in it. Okay. Catherine Keener, Wallace Shawn, a bunch of names in the movie. But I got this press release. It's like, hey, because it was a classical music station. You want to interview Christopher Walken? Sure, I'll interview Christopher Walken.
Right.
So I get a phone interview with Christopher Walken. And unlike most circumstances where you do interviews on classical music stations, you just set it up with the PR people in advance and you just go right on and do the interview. But Christopher Walken being Christopher Walken, he's a big star. Mm-hmm. So they have to have the handler come on with you, and talk to you for a little bit. Okay. So when Chris comes on, prepping
you.
Yeah. Don't say anything about Natalie Wood. You can't talk about Natalie Wood.
The do's and the don'ts. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. All right. Can't talk about Natalie Wood. And she goes, this is like a kid. This was somebody younger than us.
Wow.
And she says, and something about cowbell. You're not supposed to say anything about cowbell. I don't know what that means. Do you remember the sketch with Christopher Walken with the cowbell with the Blue Oyster Cult with on Saturday Night Live? With the more cowbell.
Oh, you know what? That does sound familiar now you're saying.
Yeah. So apparently he was real played out on people like bringing that up in interviews, and I wasn't supposed to bring up the cowbell. So, but and I was like, really nervous. I don't usually get nervous when I interview people, but I was nervous when I interviewed Christopher Walken because one, he's big name, but two, he's Christopher Walken. I don't want Christopher Walken showing up if he's not happy with the interview. But it went well. It was like a 10-minute interview. Not a lot else to report. He wasn't like totally whacked out or anything. It was he was very, down to earth in the interview.
I was just going to say, Ross, because I've read interviews that more a published interview, and he really seems just like a really down to earth guy. Just from what
he wasn't crazy like his characters.
No,
quirky, but down to down to, and he was totally into the movie and everything. So it went well.
It's okay. I've been accused of being quirky too. So
the more memorable part of the interview was the prep from the handler. It was just so funny that she didn't know even what she was warning me against.
Well, I was just going to say, did she even know who Natalie Wood was? I mean,
I know.
Probably wasn't even sure when that happened, and that whole thing is a tragic. Tragic.
Definitely. Nobody knows what happened, but I'm not even going to go into all that. But
no.
But he was so good about it and so cool with it. At the end of the interview, you go, "Oh, thanks so much. All right, yeah, great. All right, thanks a lot." So right at the end, I should have said, "Oh, and Chris, yeah, more cowbell," and hung up.
But being the professional that you are, Ross,
I didn't do it.
You're just joking about it. What year was that you did the interview?
Oh goodness.
Was it
whenever a late quartet was out? You can Google it.
Okay.
Maybe 10 years ago. I don't know.
Was it that long ago then? Okay. It's funny. I saw him in an early, when I say early, it was probably from the 70s Hawaii 5-0 episode, and he was playing a sailor in that. And that's why I love watching. I mean, it's the genre, but when you watch episodic television, especially from that the time period, whether it's the 60s, 70s, now, we're in 23, so you can even say the 80s, or, I almost hate to say the 90s, where you see a lot of actors that were just developing and, finding themselves, and then they've gone on to be, well-established actors or movie stars. Although movie star, I don't even want to use that term. I don't think that seems like a term that was from the past. But somebody that's very well known, I'll just say that.
Yeah. Well, that's my Christopher Walken story.
No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and there was something else. Oh, Phantasm. I would love to do Phantasm at some point. If you ever, we don't have to do it this year, but if you ever are up for that, that's like a really wacky movie.
Yeah, that movie came out about 3 years after this one, so that was I see a comment from William saying, "I was shocked how little of Burgess Meredith is in this film. Clearly, Dan Curtis only had the budget to hire him for one day's work." No, it's true. I mean, essentially, he just, the phone rings and we find out that they're going to accept the offer, and Eileen Eckert answers the phone, and that's all you see. It's her going to the phone, and then she's like, "Oh, great. We're very happy to hear." And then she hangs up, and then it's like the camera pulls back, and then there's Burgess Meredith in the background looking at her, and he goes, And the rest is history.
He plays essentially the same part in The Sentinel. It's the same kind of character. Yeah, yeah. Needs more cowbell. I've got a fever, and the only what is it? And the only cure, or the only prescription, is more cowbell. Is what he says. I got a fever. Yeah, I'm not going to do an impression. I don't want him coming after me.
No, you don't want that.
I'm telling you.
But oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to talk about the stresses on the set. You know, Betty Davis. You said that she wasn't paid. She felt like she wasn't paid proper
attention, respect.
Yeah, due by from Karen Black. Oliver Reed, she just couldn't stand. She said he was one of the most loathsome human beings I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. Is what she said. Well, apparently Oliver Reed and his stunt double. I don't know if you know about this. Betty Davis used to get her meal on a cart that they would put outside of her room, and Oliver Reed saw this cart and he eggs his stunt double on and says, "Hey, I bet I can ride it further than you can." And they would take turns riding her lunch, basically, or her dinner down the hallway, and the food would be flying. Oliver Reed was a beast. All right, we love him. We love him.
You know what the funny thing is? When this movie was being made, Oliver Reed was like 37 years old. He was like
crazy.
20 years younger than we are now, Ross.
But he was going for. She says, "Listen, now you can do your doctoral dissertation or something." It's like, what was? I said, "How old is this guy?" He's like 50 years old, but he was like 36. He said
37, 37. Yeah. May said Burgess Meredith was great in The Sentinel. That's one of the scariest movies of all time. Oh, I'm gonna have. I remember them televising it or being advertised, but I never saw it. So now that's on the list.
I think Jeff Goldblum turns up in one scene. I don't think he has any lines, but he's in there, and it's like, man, it was Jeff Goldblum always looked exactly the same until just a few years ago.
And it's probably
his goatee now. Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably after he did Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because I think Body Snatchers was his first movie, and that was
78.
That was 78, 45 years ago.
Sentinel was 77.
Oh, so it was before. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was before Body Snatchers, but and he was in Nashville with Karen Black, actually.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I think I was 75 when that was out. And he doesn't have any lines in that movie either. He just rides a motorcycle. He's the man on the. He's got a 3-wheeler.
Colin just posted something in a YouTube video. Thanks for sharing, Colin. Check it out later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we will check that out. Oliver Reed just, he drank like a god, we know, and he hell raised. He was one of the last of the hell raisers. And Christopher Lee said about him, he said, after drink number 8, he became a complete monster.
Wow.
It was awful to see.
That's a shame, man.
You know the story about his death, of course, right?
He died during Gladiator. He died
Gladiator. They told him
1 years old.
Yeah. He went out for lunch, and they he hadn't had a drink apparently in a couple of months, but he met some sailors in Malta, and of course a drinking contest ensued with much arm wrestling. And Oliver Reed, of course, he never does anything by half measures, So what he had at that lunch, he had 8 pints of beer.
Oh God.
He had 12 shots of rum.
Oh my goodness.
Half a bottle of whiskey. And just to kind of cleanse his palate, he had some shots of cognac. He arm wrestled and beat 5 sailors in the Royal Navy, and then he dropped dead. And his bar tab was $435.
And that was what, in 1991?
Oh my God!
In the 1990s, can you imagine? Oh my God!
Yeah, I know. It's not funny, but it's funny.
That's crazy.
It's
Yeah.
It's not to be admired. It's not to be laughed at. But come on, I admire it and I laugh at it.
Yeah.
I admit, I'm totally immature. But he was only 61 when he died.
He was, yeah, he was very young.
And they had to complete the, his part in Gladiator with CG trickery to kind of get him to finish Yeah, he was almost done with the role, I think, anyway at that point. But they had to do a few scenes where they CG'd him a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Now, William said, "Let's be honest. Who really enjoyed working with him?" It's sad but true, but
but you know, he had a strong presence and he was
he
great.
did.
I mean, Bill Sykes and Oliver, you know, he was in all of the Ken Russell movies that he did with you know the Devils and the D.H. Lawrence movie he did with him and goodness gracious, I mean he was in Tommy. He was in so much.
Yeah, and it's he had raw talent. I mean, it's tragic because
Yeah.
it's a fine line. It's like between
Oh
that and
yeah, and you
insanity.
get him together with you know, oh my god, he formed a friendship with Keith Moon, and that was the end. You know, like with the two of those guys, they were unstoppable.
Colin said, "Curse of the Werewolf." He was really good.
Curse of the Werewolf, right before he really got big. Yeah, he was in the Hammer film.
Yeah, that's just no. I remember. I thought he did a really good performance in this, and again, too. I mean, being the type of person he was, to be so withdrawn, and I think that with the character development, it really would have been interesting. They touch upon it, as you were saying, with that footage that was cut out. But I think if it had been inserted, it would have really helped the characters along that much more, because we do find out through some of the dialogue that it's almost like with Marion, she comes across almost as that I don't know, that they're having, obviously they're having some kind of problems, so there's that, but almost like she's spoiled, like she wasn't getting her way in regards to staying at the house. Like she really wanted to stay at the house, and then he was trying to convince her that, he was waiting for the catch supposedly too, when he heard that it was going to be $900 only. What's the catch? And the only catch was, per se, and then they're almost offended by it, was that they would have to check in on the mother, because the mother was 85 years old. She did not want to socialize around people. All they were asking was that food be prepared 3 times a day and just left for her in this sitting room that you were talking about earlier, that had all of these photographs and a musical box that Karen Black is very much attracted to, she's almost enamored with, and just like fixated on. So there's all of that playing into it. So when they go back to New York, and we only see them in New York, which is kind of, it almost felt like, why wasn't there more to that whole piece? But trying to decide whether or not they're going to take it or not. And he's, saying to her, it really means that much to you. And then she's like, it does. And and then he's, grabbing her and like trying to snuggle up with her. And then, the next thing is it cuts, and then they're on their way back to the house. And only this time they have Anne Elizabeth with them, Betty Davis, along with their son. And they're going there, and everything is starting in motion. And then when they arrive to find out that the brother and the sister, the Allardyces, are not there, and pretty much leave a note with the key saying, "Don't worry about anything, just take care of her," and that's it. So they didn't even pay the $900, or did they? And then they paid it with their lives.
Exactly. It was a cheap fertilizer. They were burnt offerings. The significance of the title. They were sacrifices, is what they went to the house. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But,
so there you go.
There you go. And I'll show a couple of photos. So I didn't do a lot for this, but let me put them up here.
I thought it was interesting that Bob Fosse was originally going to direct it. The director and choreographer, the guy who did Cabaret, was going to do this movie at a point. But he worked on it for a little bit, developing it, but then he just walked off. I think he was convinced by who's the guy who did Singing in the Rain? Stanley Donen, I think, told him to get away from it. He said, "Don't work on that movie; it's going to stink."
And here we are, 47 years later, and we're talking about it. So it couldn't have been all that bad. Oh boy. But anyway, here you go. They're on their way, and Oliver Reed in the pool. Yeah, and so tying into that, so everything is just kind of moving along, but things in the house don't seem to be. What is it? The one light isn't working, and then what happens is Ben cuts himself on the champagne bottle, and then what happens is his son Davey turns on the light, and then the camera just like it's like the audience isn't aware, so the camera goes right to the light to say, okay, why did the light come on? And it's playing the eerie music. I mean, you have that taking place.
The eerie music, right?
The eerie music.
The double basses and the shrieking violins.
Yeah, exactly.
The piano. Yeah.
They're cleaning out the pool and trying to get that all set up. And then what happens is they get that all fixed and they get the water pump going. And before they do that, they're going in the backyard or the behind the house, and then they find an old cemetery. But then the one thing is, I don't know if you caught this with the cemetery, when they find the headstones, they're only going back. It's only family members, and then it like stops like in the 1800s. There's no burials that are current back there, and that's it's like why. And then you see this this like tricycle that's left of it. And the camera pans in on that. What was your take on that, Ross? Out of curiosity.
Oh, my take.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, they could the family plot could be full, and they could be getting buried in another cemetery. I'm a rationalist.
Now, be irrational. But I mean, what was your take on the tricycle?
I don't know. I guess that was just supposed to be.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But what you mentioned about Oliver Reed and or what was his name in the movie? Ben and Davey. Yeah, when they had the pump with the pool.
Yep.
I'm convinced that was totally an improv with Oliver Reed when he's trying to get the pump to work to get the really rancid water out of the pool. And the kid's telling him, you can't figure it out. The kid's telling, I can fix that in 2 seconds. Oh yeah, we'll come over here. I'll bet you $5 you can't. And the kid flips the valve and it works. And Oliver Reed just grabs him and starts splashing that rancid water in his face. You remember that?
I do.
I'm sure that was totally just him doing just total improv. Making the kid drink the rat water.
Martin is saying red rum, red rum.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. So yeah, and then they get the pool going, they get it cleaned, and then he's doing his dives and he belly flops into the water. And then what happens is he finds a pair of old glasses, like probably from they look like the chauffeur's glasses actually. And it has a hole right in the dead on the on the right side. There's like a hole. It's shattered glass that's holding together, and it's got this hole. And he looks into it, right. and then Davey starts. Yeah, Davey starts talking to him, and then he's like, "What?"
The Godfather, the guy gets it through the glasses in the finale, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But can you explain to me also? I mean, I know it's a horror movie, and it's not supposed to be taken totally rationally. But Oliver Reed tries to escape from the house at the point with the station wagon. And we actually see, a tree falls in front of the car, first of all, so he can't leave the premises. But we actually see like some vegetation, a vine or whatever, actually wraps around his leg. Yes. And it's like, that's a little extreme. I mean, it's because everything else is kind of ambiguous. Mm-hmm. But you see this thing actually grab him. And he manages to get away, and he's ramming the thing with the car. Can't get out. And the next scene, you have the doctor there tending to him in the house. How did the doctor get in?
Good point. I didn't even think of that. That's a
it's a horror movie, so it could be it has a dream logic maybe, and maybe it was all in in their heads in some degree. Maybe they were tied there, and there was no real physical impediment with the tree or anything like that, but it was more a hallucination.
That could be.
Yeah. but it's probably just bad continuity.
It's probably that. No, I didn't catch that. I mean, I know that the tree came down and everything, and like you said about the vine that gets him, it was almost like watching something from forgive the reference, Space 1999, The Rules of Luton, where the plants were going after the animals. But with that, that was just invoking the horror that the house was not going to let him go. I mean, that was the whole point of that. And I think you're right too in regards to that was probably the most significant or the most spelled out of anything, because everything is really inferred. But physically, we see that the tree comes down, so that's the house or the grounds trying to prevent him from leaving, and then it even takes it to the next level where the vine goes around his foot, and he's being almost like smothered and being held, but then he was able to do that. You know what, Colin? Colin's asking about the Trek reference. Actually, I didn't do one for this movie, and we always like to say on the show, all roads lead to Star Trek. I mean, again, I just did the 1999 reference, all roads lead to Space 1999 with the Rules of Luton, with the plants and everything. But in regards to casts, no, there was none that I came up with. I'm sure there could have been somebody behind the scenes, which I did not delve into to the extent that I usually do, that could have been tied to this movie with Star Trek. That's definitely a possibility. Or you could do even an indirect reference, that some of the people that worked on this worked with other actors that actually worked on Star Trek.
Oh, there you go.
You could do
degree of separation or something.
6 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon. You could do that, but
yeah.
But no, that's definitely an instance. But before we even get to this point that you brought up, we have the swimming pool, which is really disturbing, because what happens is he puts the glasses down, and then Davy jumps into the pool, and he's kind of like roughhousing with his dad, and then he says, "Oh, come on, go on my shoulders," and he goes, "I'll flip you," and he flips him, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun." He goes, "Yeah, you like that, huh? Oh, let me do that again." He flips again. "Yeah, that was great." And then he's like, "All right, and then he starts tossing him, and then of course Betty Davis, that the tension's brewing with the music again, and Betty Davis is like, "Stop that! You're in the high end of the pool. It's very deep there." And then the next thing you know, you've got Oliver Reed, Ben, taking his son, and he's tossing him, and he's pretty much trying to drown him. He's got his arm, around his neck. And they do a scene where Davy gets down into the bottom of the pool because he dropped his goggles, and he grabs the goggles, and he's like, "Help, help." And then what happens is at one point when he's thrown, and then Oliver Reed is, coming right at him. And that was the photo that I was actually just sharing before with that. He's coming at him, and then he takes the goggles, and then he slams him, and he gets, he's like bleeding. And then Oliver Reed is, Davy starts running, and then Oliver Reed is almost like this like monster, and he goes, and then he just like turns around and he starts to swim away. And it was just the way he conveyed it. It was just like, that was just like gruesome, and he basically was trying to drown his own child. But
well, there you go. The metaphor for the abuse. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I mentioned. Yeah. The if you ever do see The Haunting, 1963 version of The Haunting, Robert Wise directed it.
Oh, okay.
But there are a lot of themes, or a lot of things that turn up in this movie that are handled a little more skillfully in that movie. And it's most effective if you watch it alone in the dark.
Oh, there you go.
In the dark, in the night.
Don't be afraid of the dark.
Yeah. It was the first time I saw it. Yeah, I was like totally alone, watching this thing in the middle of the night. So that was a pretty freaky movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another. Oh, and then the other thing that happens. Now, the other thing that they showcase is when they arrive there, they're getting things situated. Anne Elizabeth is out. She's painting. She's taking in the sunshine. She's vibrant. She's just, and she jokes about her age. And then, Oliver Reed, Ben is just like saying, "Oh, you're an oldie." And, there's all that inference about being older. And she's, she's not coming across that she's old. She's enjoying life. She's having a good time. But then what they do is, it's time, a few weeks go by, time starts going by, you see her, and she says that she overslept and that, she just wanted to sleep in. And, and she's telling that to Marion. And there seems to be like a little tension too between their relationship in regards to getting along. And it's starting to formulate even more so because Marion has secluded herself from everybody because she's so enamored with the house as opposed to being enamored with anything else. And she is fixated on taking care of Mrs. Allardyce, who we never see. And we don't even know if she's seen her. It seems like that she hasn't, but she just says that she wants to be, left alone and, to herself. She leaves the food. The food goes untouched. And all of this is happening. Bette Davis' character, the aunt, tries to go see her, and she's exhausted, and she goes up to the steps. At one point she was going to take a nap, and it's in the middle of the day, and then she gets upset with herself, and she's like starts like hitting the pillows and saying, "No, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do this." She wants to be out and about. Tries to see Mrs. Allardyce, and then of course when she gets up to the sitting room, Marion is there and just opens the door and is like, get out. Essentially, she's telling her, I'll pass on the word that you came to stop by, and that's it. And then what happens is she goes back down to take a nap, and she's starting to get gray too. And then they make the comment about that to she makes that comment to Karen Black, Marion, that Marion is starting to get gray.
Yeah.
So it's the life energy, the essence is kind of being sucked out of them on different levels. And then go ahead.
No, it's scary when I go back and watch this movie as a 57-year-old is that Bette Davis doesn't look that old anymore.
Right.
It's like, boy, she was really old. It's like, wait a minute, Betty's doesn't look that old. Until when she gets close to death. I remember, one of the things that Karen Black said, she's seen real people die that didn't look as bad as Bette Davis did in this movie.
Ouch.
They gave her like some really horrific makeup.
Jeff Rubel saying Life Force. Isn't that the movie with Patrick Stewart?
Yeah. My favorite Patrick Stewart movie, Roy.
Matilda May.
Everybody drink.
Basically.
Don't mind if I do.
There he goes.
You notice I switched to the winter brew now. It's October. Trying to break out the Guinness.
What is it? Sam Adams Oktoberfest. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
No, so that's another example of that. And then what happens is it starts to get even worse where then there's the episode where Davy gets locked in where he can't Oliver Reed, Ben hears the gas hissing, and then he tries to open the door to his son's room, and he can't get it open. He breaks it down and then breaks the window open, and Davy is almost suffocated because of the gas. And then Marion kind of accuses Bette Davis of going in there and tampering with the radiator and everything. So there's that piece. And then she's trying to remember, and it's almost like she's becoming senile. And she's like, I would never do anything to harm Davy. And, why are you being this way, towards me? And then it gets really critical where she's like screaming in the middle of the night. And then did you catch when she like moves, you could hear her bones breaking? Did you catch that?
I heard
cracking.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about bones breaking, but
and then she can't even talk. She's like, and then they try calling the doctor, and Ben tries to call the doctor, and all the lines are busy. And then when Marion does it, she gets through, and then Ben tells, and this was a scene that really like creeped me out. Ben tells Marion just to wait downstairs for the doctor, and what happens is Ben looks out the window. Now he actually had a vision of seeing the chauffeur from when he was a child earlier in the movie and pulling up, and it really, he's drinking. In fact, I think he's like drinking a beer.
Of course.
Yeah. And he's just like laying on, he just got done with he's like chopping grass, or not the weeds and everything and the vines. And then what happens is he looks and then he sees the chauffeur with the smile, and he starts like having a panic attack, and he can't even like move. And then he looks again, and then the chauffeur's gone. He's not even there.
Yeah.
And it's just all so freaky.
Remember when you couldn't get cores on the East Coast? That was even that the whole thing with Smokey and the Bandit, or one of those
Oh geez,
one of those movies.
it might have been. I don't remember that.
Yeah, which movie was that? It was one of those things where they were racing across country with a truck full of cores and with the police in pursuit. I think it was Smokey and the Bandit. I don't remember. Cannonball Run, one of those things.
Cannonball Run. Oh my god!
I don't know what it was, but yeah, I remember that because I was too young to drink at that point. But apparently it was a big deal to get the cores on the East Coast. But since they filmed it in California, Oliver Reed was like guzzling the cores, even though they were supposed to be in New York.
Oh, there you go. Colin.
There you go.
Star Trek Link, the original series, the actor who played the chauffeur was the Next Generation. I did not realize that Anthony James was the Next Generation. Good job, Colin, on that. I did not realize that.
With all his TV credits, he had to have been in one of the Star Trek incarnations.
Yeah, I did not realize. But Next Generation, I didn't realize he was in.
Yeah,
I missed that one because out of the original series, obviously that's my thing. I love the original series. I mean, it's at the forefront. But Next Generation, I did watch from beginning to end, from season 1 to 7. The other incarnations, not so much. Martin saying not so much camaraderie on the set then.
No, there was not a lot of camaraderie on the set.
You know what, Jeff? You're right. And you know what? He was in the last. I forgot all about that. I totally forgot. He was in the last episode of the first season where the Romulans come back. In fact, he's on with the other guy that plays the Romulan is the guy that played he was a regular recurring character on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and he was a Cardassian, and his name is it Mark Alameo, or I'm butchering his name, but I totally forgot that he was in that episode. Good job, Jeff, and good job, Colin. Yeah, and that was Mark Alameo. Yep.
Was he a Romulan chauffeur?
He was not a Romulan chauffeur, but essentially what happens is they come there. It's the first time you see them in Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they said that something had taken place and that they had been busy, and essentially what they say is we're back, and it's like, ooh. It's the final episode of the first season. It's right after the episode Conspiracy, which I always like to joke about and say, you'll be one of us soon. But anyway, yep, there's the Trek. I am embarrassed that I did not even think of that, but it's been, the Neutral Zone episode. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. See, our viewers are on top of their game, Ross. Our viewers, they know, Ross. But anyway, getting back, so it's like these turn of events, and when Aunt Elizabeth is essentially practically dying, and they're waiting for the doctor, and then they hear this vehicle approaching, Oliver Reed looks out the window because he's recognizing the sound, but it doesn't sound like an ordinary car, and it's the car that the chauffeur was driving, and he's like immersed with terror, and he pretty much just like falls to his feet, and he's like sitting next to Aunt Elizabeth, and she can't talk, and she's trying to pull herself up, and then they hear at the door they hear coming up the steps, and then they hear the door's trying to open, and it won't open, and then finally there's a bang after like the third or fourth time, and then what happens is it's the chauffeur, and he's pretty much got a coffin there, and he brings it in, and she screams, and then Oliver Reed, Ben is like screaming, and then the next thing cuts, and then they're at a funeral. It was just.
If you like it occurred to me, you should like Phantasm. If you like the chauffeur in this movie, if you want to see a movie that's entirely like the chauffeur, Phantasm is the movie for you. Because whereas you have like 3 or 4 hallucinations with the chauffeur in this one, the entire movie Phantasm is a hallucination of that caliber.
So let me ask you a question, Ross.
Yeah.
She sees him. She sees the chauffeur too.
Yeah. Well, we think, yeah, because she's terrified.
She's
Yeah.
terrified. It's like the
Right.
terror of him coming through is what kills her,
Right.
or
Right.
pushes her over the edge. But then,
Yeah.
was he really there or wasn't he? That's
I
the
know. It's like the trees, what's real and what's not.
question.
But you know, it's funny that Betty Davis would turn up in this movie, but she had a whole resurgence in the 1960s with turning up in horror movies. In fact, she was the one that kind of spurred all these other golden age Hollywood actresses to try their hands at horror, so that you would have people like Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine
Mm.
and her big rival in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane,
Yeah.
uh, uh, Joan Crawford.
John
You know,
Crawford.
where they weren't afraid.
Eyes.
They weren't afraid to not to look unglamorous. You know what I mean?
Right.
They got all because they couldn't get parts. This has been a problem until fairly recently that there weren't, and even now people still complain. Actors still complain that there aren't good parts for older women. So once they got past a certain age, they weren't getting, and there was a whole collapse of the studio system, so they weren't taken care of anymore by Warner Brothers or what have you. So they had to make their own way, and they discovered that she discovered that she'd turn up in these horror movies and that they were actually popular. So when after Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, there was Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. She did a film called Dead Ringers where she plays an evil twin. It's like the good Betty Davis and the bad Betty Davis. So this was a whole. Oh, and her last one of her, it wasn't her last film, but one of her later films, she did a film called Watcher in the Woods for Disney,
Sure.
which I have never seen. I really wanted to see it when it came out, but I remember it was totally hampered by all kinds of problems, production woes, and what have you. And they pulled it from theaters and reshot the ending and all this other stuff. So I never actually got to see it. And now I couldn't. The last time I checked, I couldn't even stream it on Amazon Prime or anything because I think Disney has it in their behind their they have all their booty behind in their vault. You can't get into their little Aladdin's cave anymore unless you subscribe to Disney Plus or what have you. And I'm not doing it.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, Betty Davis too. You just reminded me. What was it? I think it was 7. We didn't cover it, or we were going to. Escape from Witch Mountain. Wasn't she with Christopher
Yes.
Lee? 1977.
Yeah. And I think that who was in it? It wasn't Burgess. Somebody else from this movie was in that movie.
Oh, okay.
With her. Was it Burgess Meredith? Who was in it?
I know Christopher Lee was.
Yeah, but somebody was in this movie. It wasn't Anthony James, was it? He wasn't in it.
Could have been.
I don't know. There was somebody that was in this movie that was in the Witch Mountain movie.
Oh, which I'm trying to think. Eddie Albert was in that film.
Yeah, it wasn't Eddie Albert though.
And that actually, Escape from Witch Mountain was a year before this movie. It was 75, but it would have been filmed in 74. This film came out in 76, but was shot in 75.
So was she in the first one or the second one? The Witch Mountain movies.
I think she was in the second one. So
the second one, right?
What was that? Escape was the first one, and then what was it? Return to Witch Mountain. That's the one where they.
Or was Return first?
No, Return would have been. I think Return was second.
We almost did one of the Witch Mountain movies on the show. And for some reason we ditched it.
Return came out in 78, so it was a couple of years later.
All right.
Yeah.
Something.
There was a few years between them in regards to that, but I'm trying to think. No, you know what? Anthony James was in Return to Witch Mountain. You're right.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So you're right.
No hard feelings with the show.
No hard feelings.
So do we cover everything? Are we done?
Nice, Ross. No, the one. Well, anyway, we've talked about, like I was saying, probably in regards to the creepiest of the characters. I mean, really, in my opinion, would have to be Anthony James as the hearse driver. I mean, he pardon the expression, but he really drove that part well. We touched upon everything that was happening. I mean, Ben is very upset because of Marion not going to the funeral, and she's like, Marion says that she couldn't leave the house. She would have felt bad leaving Mrs. Alliday, the 85-year-old that's upstairs. So anyway, with all of that taking place, then the one thing that pushes everything over the edge, so to speak, is after that, during the night, Ben looks out and he sees, during the rainstorm, that the house is essentially revitalizing itself. Old wood is coming off, the tiles are reforming, and he
It's
grabs
molting.
yeah, exactly. He grabs Davy and he basically says, we're getting out of here. And then, the son is like, what about mom? And he grabs him and then they get the car and he just drives off. And then of course, then Marion sees what's happening and she runs outside and she's trying to, stop them. And then meanwhile, the son is trying to, pounce on Oliver Reed, to stop, which he won't do. And then that's when that whole situation happens with the tree coming down. And, she brings him back. The doctor checks on him. And it's a good point too, Ross, about the doctor. How did the doctor get there? But essentially he says that he's like in a state of shock and he's got to deal with everything. And the next day when they're out, Oliver Reed's character Ben is just super withdrawn. He's just like in a catatonic state and he can't even like move. And Davy is trying to impress him. He jumps into the pool and he's trying to swim. And then all of a sudden the pool just starts going crazy. And it's almost like he's in this, all these tides are coming in and the waves are going and he's essentially going to drown. And Marion, for whatever reason, looks out the window and she's like, don't go in that side of the pool. Don't go outside of the pool. And then she tries to run out to save him. And when she's upstairs and then the door closes on her and she can't get out to get outside. And then she finally, I think, breaks the window or whatever. And then, goes out and jumps in the pool. Meanwhile, you've got, Oliver Reed's character, Ben, who's just immobilized because of everything that he's endured. And he's trying to get to Davy and he can't do it. And he's like almost like crawling because he's just like so, possessed from all the terror that he's, unseen. And then what happens is Marion gets him out of the pool and she says that, we're going to leave. And it's like, okay, what? They're going to escape. They're going to get out of this situation. And, Ben is like, I really tried to get to Davy and I just couldn't. So they compose themselves and he's talking. And then the next scene is where it's the next day and they're getting ready to drive off. She's going to drive the car. And then she says that she really should go upstairs to tell Mrs. Allardyce that they're leaving. And then he's like, I don't want you going back into that house. I don't want you. And she's like, I have to tell her because, it's the right thing to do. So what happens is she goes in, she says, I'll be right back. She goes upstairs to go, talk to Mrs. Allardyce. And then time goes by and it's like, she's not coming back down. What's going on? And what happens is Ben says he's going to go upstairs to get, Davy's mom. And he says, he'll be back. And then we finally get to go into not just the sitting room, but the room where Mrs. Allardyce is at. And Ben walks in there and knocks on the door, walks in, and you just see this woman that's in this chair, but you don't see her. And he's letting her know that Marion came up there and where is she? And he wants to talk to her. And, he wants that they're going to be leaving and she will not respond. And he's getting really, really upset. And he started like quake and panic. And he's like, I'm talking to you. Will you answer me? And then what happens is he turns the chair to see her. And then what happens is you see Marion, who is now Mrs. Allardyce.
Who is now Norman Bates.
And it is so creepy. And they do that music. It's like, the 5 chords. And he's just like, he's so consumed with horror. He just doesn't know how to deal with it. And he's like, oh my God. And he's like, Marion. And then she just looks at him and says, I've been waiting for you, Ben. And he's like, oh my God. And then she goes towards him. And then the next thing you know, and this is the part I was wrestling with in regards to that, Ross. She was originally facing the window or a window when she sees him. And he's backing up going towards like almost like the door area. And then she starts to go for him like she's going to push him. But I don't know if it's just that he was so, immobile from all the horror, the terror, or she was just this possessed being. We don't know. I mean, we just don't know. In fact, I would love to read the book and see what the book's take is on this. But the next scene is, though, you see Oliver Reed, Ben, going crashing through the window that's like 4 stories up, and he's just tumbling down, 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 and then, you know, Davy's in the car, and then the next thing you know, bam, and it's like, you know, he's face first right into the glass, and it's just like, you know, he's dead. And I mean, he hit right into the glass, and then Davy's like covered with blood that came through the splattered window, and he's outside screaming, saying, "Mom, Mom!" And then all of a sudden, he gets onto the other side of the building, the house, and then the chimney starts to go, one of the chimneys, and then all this bricks start coming down, and he's just like screaming in terror, and then it just ends there,
like The Omen.
Yeah. Yes.
Which was the same year. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next scene is, of course, we're seeing the house. It looks completely different, and then you have the voiceovers of Burgess Meredith and Eileen Eckert saying how wonderful the house looks and how great it is, and also Dobbs. He's part of it too. I mean, the caretaker, the handyman, he's part of it, and pretty much Dub Taylor, excuse me, yeah. And they say, "Oh, and you know what's even great? We have Mom back with us now." And then they do a thing of where you're seeing all the pictures that are in the sitting room,
right?
And what they do is you see the picture of Ben, you see the picture of Davy, and then you see the picture of Anne Elizabeth on there, and
Jack Nicholson.
And Jack Nicholson, yeah, there you go.
No, not really.
No, but yeah.
Supposedly, Dan Taylor's or Dan Curtis's photos in there too somewhere.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that. That's pretty cool.
It's his cameo.
He made the cameo. He made sure he was a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was like burnt offerings, though. I mean, it was. I still think of that. It's pretty impactful.
Well, don't go to the book expecting an explanation of the ending, because apparently it was different from the book. The book was more ambiguous, and he didn't think it would. Dan Curtis didn't think it would work as a, cinematically as a movie. So he made up the whole ending with, I assume, with Karen Black assuming, Allardyce's chair and the whole thing with Oliver Reed. I don't know how it ended in the book at all. So that's one thing we can't spoil tonight, folks.
Okay.
You can still enjoy the book.
There you go. May, I'm just commenting. I saw your comment. Catherine Shell appeared with Betty Davis and Madison. I'll have to check that out. I think, you know what? I think I did catch that. Was Robert Wagner in that movie? I think Robert Wagner was in that film. I caught this movie during COVID. And
all roads lead to Natalie Wood.
Yeah. No, what am I saying? Not Natalie Wood. I'm sorry. Catherine Shell.
Robert Wagner is what you said.
Yeah. I meant Catherine Shell. I'm sorry. Catherine Shell. Well, yeah, Robert Wagner. Right.
We were talking about Walken earlier. So.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
This show must not be archived.
There you go. In regards to Robert Cobert, Ross, I know you've talked about him before.
I have. Yeah, I mean, he did a lot of stuff, but the bulk of his credits are actually, Dan Curtis productions. Yep. I mean, he started out as a clarinetist playing in Borscht Belt, resorts in the Catskills. He studied for a year at Juilliard, and during that time, he was doing arrangements for WOR radio.
Okay.
He was doing some ghost writing for better-known composers, working with them. And so then when he got involved with Dan Curtis, his big breakthrough was for Dark Shadows. But before even Dark Shadows, he did do a couple of soap operas in the 1960s. So I guess you can't say it's his big breakthrough, but it really determined the rest of his career when he teamed up with Dan Curtis. But he did music for the soaps The Doctors and The Unmarrieds in the 60s. And it's funny because Dark Shadows really was, as we know, like the Gothic soap opera. was a soap opera, but it had vampires and werewolves and witches and things. So yeah, so he worked on that, and then from there he worked on Dan Curtis's monster remakes and the Night Stalker and the movie, TV movie, and this is really hard to. I wonder what got Dan Curtis from doing all this genre stuff into The Winds of War, because he directed that miniseries of Robert Mitchum.
Oh yeah, sure.
And the sequel series, War and Remembrance, and he got great acclaim and nominations and everything else for those series, which I think is really remarkable considering, I love genre stuff, but it doesn't get that kind of respect, and for him to go to a project like that, or the projects like those after, doing Trilogy of Terror and that sort of thing, and Burn Offerings is quite something. So anyways, that's Robert Cobert. He also did, and I don't know if he said the name Cobert or Cobert. Robert Cobert. Did we find out it was Cobert? Maybe it's Robert Cobert.
Oh, it's Cobert. Okay. Gotcha.
No, I'm just saying maybe it's Robert Cobert. I don't know. But in any case, he also did some of those Goodson Todd. Was it Goodson Todd?
Sure. Goodson Todman Productions.
Todman Productions. Remember those game shows?
Absolutely. Yeah.
$25,000 Pyramid and
Price is Right. Password.
To Tell the Truth. He did a lot of the
Family Feud
music for those things. Yeah, Family Feud I don't think was in his list of credits, but he did things for them. And he was nominated for a Grammy Award in 1969 for a theme he'd written for Dark Shadows called Quentin's Theme. But he lost out to John Barry for Midnight Cowboy. Yeah, Dark Shadows music was his big breakthrough, right? And the Night Stalker movies, correct. Yeah, so there you go. That's what I've got. He lived to be 95. He died in 2020, so not that long ago. The last time we talked about him, he could have been alive or just recently passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we did Trilogy of Terror, I think he was still alive.
I think he was still alive, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was 3 years ago, so.
Yeah, because late in life, I remember he was writing some orchestral stuff, and it seemed like it was they were recent projects that he had worked on, and that's so he was probably still alive back then, but he died in 2020.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, so that's pretty much Burn Offerings, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to say his name? Is it Robert Cobert? Robert Cobert?
I don't know. It's up for grabs. We will find out, though.
Cobert.
I was going with Cobert, but it could,
Could be. Probably not French.
Yeah.
Cobert.
There you go.
I don't know.
But
Robert
Cobert.
Yeah.
We're going to wind things down real quickly. If you have any comments that you want to make, please post them in the section. We'll come upon them. We'll come back. Just going to do the shout outs real quick. And as I share my screen, there we go. So just as an update, folks, the Eagle has landed. Kickstarter is it's still in flight. There are 11 more days left to help support the project. It is at $120,840. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, so anyway, just wanted to remind everybody, if you need information in regards to the website, it's www.eagledocumentary.com. There'll be more information I'll post during the week as well. Want to give a shout out to our friends at Sci-Fi Distilled, Mike and Mary Beth, and they are on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and they are doing this week, which is October 4th, Hellboy, the 2019 film. So check them out.
So that was the more recent one.
Yeah.
With the guy from Stranger Things, Hooper. It's not, what's his face? From the Guillermo del Toro.
And I'm assuming, I could be wrong about this because I was, watching. I wonder if they may be doing this one, or maybe they are doing the original one. You know what, folks, tune in. This is another reason to tune into Mike and Mary Beth. Colin is saying Hellboy will always be Ron. Definitely check out Mike and Mary Beth, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and you'll find out which version they are doing. I should have actually checked with them on that. I assumed it was a more recent one, but I could be wrong.
I think I read they're actually doing another Hellboy. They're starting over at least another one. Oh, not Ron.
Oh, okay. Colin is saying not Ron Perlman, so it probably is a new one then. Okay.
So it's the other guy. The guy who was in, the one that was in the Violent Santa Claus movie. just last year.
Oh, jeez. So there you go. Just want to give a shout out to Country Gate Players. They are in production, or excuse me, they are in rehearsal for their production of Steel Magnolias, which is going to be between the dates of October 28th and November 5th. You can go to the website for Country Gate. It is www.countrygate.org, or you can also visit Bill Scarato's website, my friend Bill, and he is at www.billscarato.com, and you'll find out information in regards to the ticket prices and in regards to the sale of the show. And it is taking place in Belvedere, New Jersey. So if you are in that area, definitely check it out. It's going to be an awesome show. And also a quick shout out to Captain Phil's Planet, WSBM 90.1 FM, Stony Brook, New York. The Captain's schedule is on alternating Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. and also Friday nights from 9 to 11:30 p.m. Also, a quick shout out to our friends at Trek Talking, the Star Trek podcast. We appreciate their support. Definitely check them out. You can go to Facebook to tune into them. And again, that is Trek Talking. And I want to give a shout out to our friends at Studio One Thrift. A new store has just been opened, and now Martha and Snow are working together. Snow was helping out Martha with this, but yesterday Martha had kicked off the grand opening of the physical location of Studio One Thrift. So definitely want to give her congratulations on it. If you have the chance, definitely check out the website. The website is www.studiothrift.net. And when you go on there, you can register, and you can also receive styling tips as well. You can check out their line of merchandise as far as what they have. And it's quality, stylish, affordable clothing for both men and women. And again, styling tips come along with that. Again, we just want to give them a great shout out. Martha, a shout out for doing that. The reason why I know Martha is because of my friend John Risco, who is a grade school friend, and it's kind of cool. And Russ met John a long time ago, and we actually had him on the show because he was talking about the movies and everything. So anyway, I had the opportunity to go up there. It was great just hanging out and just being up there, and then a lot of effort has been gone into this. So definitely wishing her the best of luck with this. And so again, if you have the opportunity to check out on the website, definitely do so. If you live in the area, definitely check it out as well too in regards to information. Ross, if you can let everybody know what you've got going on.
All right. Well, these are the two shows I've got, recorded shows on now on KWAX on the West Coast, the radio station of University of Oregon. Picture Perfect's the movie music show, 5 o'clock. That's Pacific time, so it's at 8 o'clock here on the East Coast. And the Lost Chord is 4 o'clock Pacific time on Saturdays, and that's again 3 hours later. So it's for us. So it's 7 o'clock on the East Coast. And you can hear them by streaming them at the website there, kwax.uoregon.edu. Or you just Google KWAX and it'll come up, quacks like a duck. And if you're interested in what I'm doing on those shows, by all means, on Fridays and Saturdays, check out my Facebook page at Classic Ross Amico. And I do write up, little previews, little teasers there for the shows. So that's it.
That's it. Now, you did say that you had something that was brewing. Now, maybe you don't want to talk about it.
I got something else brewing. I'm not going to break it yet, but maybe I will next week.
Okay, cool. So we'll stay tuned for that, Ross, and thanks for sharing the information in regards to that.
It's pretty much brewed, but I'm not going to break it tonight.
Okay. It's brewed. It's ready to go. It's ready to be drank.
It's ready to go, but I'm not pouring it tonight.
Okay, no worries. So just want to let everybody know, next Friday, now we had to reschedule. Jeffrey actually had some things that came up in regards to interviews that he was doing. So he wasn't available, but he is going to be back on this coming Friday, Jeffrey Morris, and will be joining me as a special guest. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the top 10 favorite episodes of Space 1999. So we're planning on doing that this coming Friday, which is going to be October 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And also, just to let you know, what we are going to be doing is we're going to be doing kind of like a reboot of the show in the sense of some like the theme music and some of the credits. So very excited about that. So it's going to be kind of cool. So Ross and I got our stuff, pretty much set up, and we're looking forward to that. So Jeffrey is going to be joining on Friday, and we'll be talking about that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. And then Ross and I will continue with Halloween, and we will be back next Sunday, which is October 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we're going to talk about the classic 1981 film, An American Werewolf in London. This is a favorite. I know Mike and Mary Beth did this movie some time ago too. So yeah, we're looking forward to talking about this. This is definitely one that is very enjoyable, and I can't believe this is like a 42-year-old movie. That just blows my mind, but I say that all the time, so there you go. But anyway, looking forward to it, and yeah, and there'll be other stuff that'll be coming up that Ross and I have got planned. Also, Mike and Mary Beth are going to be joining Ross and I for our Halloween. I was going to say our Halloween crossover that we do every year. It's become a tradition, and I think this is actually going to be our fourth one. We're looking to do that, so mark your calendars on Sunday, October 29th. So just got to make sure that we're good with the dates. I think we're good. But anyway, we will post about that. I'm just Ross writes it down.
I don't want to forget.
I'm forgetting if I told you. I'm only joking. Just a little 9 o'clock, 9:30 humor. But anyway, yeah. So we are here, folks. We are getting ready for Halloween, and yeah, it's a great time of the year. And yeah, it's going to be crispy. Is this crisp? As opposed to
just wrap it up.
You all right, Ross?
It's gonna be crispy.
Anyway. I just want to say thanks for joining us, folks.
You're thinking about those chicken fingers again.
I am thinking about those chicken fingers.
It's going to be crispy.
They're going to be extra crispy. Everyone have a wonderful week. Live long and prosper, as we always like to say. And we will see you next time. Take care. Take care.